welcome to the latest episode of the Modern Brewer podcast with me, your host, Chris Lewington. Well, Christmas is almost upon us. I hope every single one out there is having a super busy festive period, very productive and selling lots of beer, because Lord knows we all kind of need it. This will actually be the final episode of the Modern Brewer podcast for this year in this format. I'm actually going to record a recap of the year that's just gone past, episode highlights, and my top takeaways from the year. I will also be sharing trends from last year and predictions for the future year in 2025 for the brewing industry. So hopefully there's some good content in there. But the final episode of 2024 is an absolute banger. Most of us have lived through the glory years of craft beer, especially, between like 2011, 2019 sort of time. And within those years, we established some of our country's most loved, revered, and respected breweries. Apart from Brewdog, none quite had the success of Beavertown. Started in the basement of the once iconic Duke's Brewing Queue in de Beauvoir Town in London. This business went from 0 to 60 in record-breaking time. It captivated craft beer fans, dominated national and international beer festivals, and created arguably the strongest individual craft beer brand in the UK, which is Neck Oil. Then, in 2018, one of those craft beer world shockwaves. Beavertown sold 49% of the company to Heineken. The public outcry was substantial, something I've never quite seen before or since. However, commercially since then, Beavertown has continued to grow its presence in the UK, especially in London. I live here and I rarely go to a pub without seeing Neck Oil on anymore. And to give you an idea, one of my really close friends, she runs a craft beer pub here. And she was saying she actually can't have Neck Oil on because as soon as she puts it on, no one will drink anything else. So how did Beavertown achieve such success? It would be naive to presume that there's only one single driver for this success, because the success is always the sum of all parts. But there is one aspect of their success that literally no one can contest, and it's the power of their branding. So with me today is someone who might have had one of the largest impacts on the craft beer world here in the UK, the creative director of Beavertown, Nick Dwyer. We're going to learn a little bit about Nick's life, how he created Beavertown's imagery, how he managed the transition from darling craft brewery to being a part of one of the biggest global corporations, how to, and importantly, how not to brand your craft brewery. Before we get into this episode, a reminder that all of this is made possible by our wonderful sponsors. And this episode is proudly sponsored by SSV Limited, your trusted partner in crafting bespoke products and solutions for the beverage industry. Whether you're just getting started or scaling up, SSV Limited is there every step of the way, from initial conception through installation to commissioning of your new equipment with exceptional after-sales support. With over a decade of experience, SSV Limited has been there supporting the beverage industry across the UK and Europe, delivering top-tier innovative brewing systems, CO2 recovery solutions, process and storage tanks, as well as everything in between. Their expertise ensures that your project meets and exceeds your expectations from concept to completion. Ready to take your business to the next level? Visit ssvlimited.co.uk to learn more about their custom-built solutions. SSV Limited. Brew more, brew better. So buckle up, listeners, and let's dive into the world of brewery branding with the iconic Nick Dwyer. Welcome to the show, Nick Dwyer.
Hello. It's good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, man. I haven't actually seen you in a while, but it's
well,
thank you so much for coming on.
Unless you count the high five we did when we saw each other running about a couple of weeks ago. Yeah,
that actually felt well cooler than I think it maybe have looked.
I was like, I actually was like physically like, oh my god, get this right. Like I was like 20 feet away, like where's his hand? I'm going to get it.
And it was like, and we caught it. It was good. You were running quick as well, because I was on a slow run, and I have like this thing. I was like, oh god, I hope you didn't think I was running really slowly for no reason at all. Like that would matter, but it felt like it was really important to me at the time.
Some people say that to me without realizing that I just go for like a short, quick run. So I'm just like not like, yeah, I know how you do your like big marathons and stuff. Whereas I'm just like, I just have 20 minutes to like get myself sweaty a bit, and so I don't feel like a piece of shit the rest of the day. Whereas like,
yeah, I mean, you were sending it, man. It was good.
Well, thank that feedback.
Well, that's it. End of the show. That was cool. Running with Nick Dwyer. That's it. All right, man. Well, look, I mean, I think everyone probably knows who you are, to be honest, who's listened to this show. But so maybe you could just start by like telling us, going right into it, and like your journey into the world of craft beer. So maybe even like before Beavertown's time, and how it sort of evolved you as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like my first experience of craft beer was Beavertown. So it was when I came from I was working in restaurants after I left art school, which is what you do as an art student. Is just at art school, but like trying to do like anything I could possibly do. I think I was doing a couple like menu illustrations for the place I was working, which was like a silver service place in Shoreditch. And my mate James, who was also at art school, but kind of immediately quit art and had been using the kind of homebrew kits, I think like Woodford's Wary homebrew kit, which is like close to my heart, and that sort of thing. And then had kind of managed to go and, I guess, like intern/apprentice with Evan at the Colonel, who had then told Logan that he had this guy that he didn't have a place for, but you're starting a brewery and might be a really good person to come help you out. And then he came to me and went, oh, I've been working with this guy and it's been really fun. And, we're making these beers and he's serving them in the restaurant that we work at. Would you be up for doing a couple of labels? And it really, really did not. It felt like, oh yeah, absolutely. Anything. And went and sat down with him and Logan in Duke's, the restaurant, fabled Duke's. And he's like, we've got this beer. It's called Gamma Ray. Then we've got another beer called Black Betty. And James says, I've seen your illustrations. They look cool. Can you have a crack at it? Absolutely. Went away, came back with what I thought were like finished labels and was like, these are great. And these are awesome. And they were like, well, we're going to give you some feedback and you need to change them. And they kind of changed into two labels, the original Gamma Ray and the original Black Betty. I mean, more on that story later, because like I do think that Gamma Ray then like no Beavertown without that Gamma Ray label, basically. Like I genuinely think that. But and also coming and doing the sessions with them, I saw how cool it looked to be in the restaurant that they were brewing in, because the setup was brewing in the kitchen, much to the chagrin of the chefs. And then the chefs would come in, they'd leave, they'd go into the bar and serve the beers they'd brewed, obviously when they were ready in the night. And so I was like, this is amazing. This is so cool. Can I come work here? And they were like, we'll talk to the manager and get the job. So I got a job there, which meant more FaceTime with Logan, more hanging out with James, more kind of showing him stuff. And from there, I was kind of able to work my way into the system that Logan had, which was like, I'm going to get a new artist every time I do a beer. Because of the concept, it had no more aspiration than like local artists doing every single beer forever, serving beers on the bar forever, 4-barrel kit forever, and which I think still exists in Lockwood. And because I was there all the time, I was able to basically show up with a sketchbook full of kind of finished ideas and be like, and like, I'm still working on this, but maybe it goes on a beer label. And that's how the original Bloody Hell label came to be. But the whole time, the kind of brand wasn't quite kind of settled in Logan's mind. He had one brand originally from a branding agency that cost about £10,000, which I think is an important detail. And at that point, he'd pay. He's like, got to get this right, £10,000, all the ideas, which almost immediately got scrapped. And then he's like, and you're doing this for exposure, so awesome. And it was still Jonah Schultz who was kind of working on the main brand, the original kind of dollar bill style brand, who now does all the New Barn stuff with Johnny and Fred and the Beavertown employees and stuff. And it does a great job, which is they're sick. And I was kind of in the background, kind of working on the back end of stuff, so getting labels ready to go to the printing place and doing a bit of the website stuff and working on a little bit. And we kind of jumped, and all of a sudden Logan had moved into the space in Hackney Wick, the big warehouse that was like half of what Truman's is now the hold of. So Truman's were next to us. We had the next to get the bit. And when I eventually managed to leave being a waiter as well as doing the design work, because he was like, come on board full time and we'll get this like being a proper thing. I think it's time we had someone doing our kind of marketing and design, even though I had no idea about marketing. It was just purely artistry, I guess. He went to America, which is, like that's where the impetus for Beavertown came from. American craft brewing was taking off and he wanted to bring it to the UK. Bit of a reductive take on the whole thing, but that was it. And he came in, I remember one time after a trip to see a couple of breweries, I think Dogfish Head, because Sam was such a big kind of influence and help to the start. And he was like, look, they're really going for it with the artwork in America. I wrap your Gamma Ray label around a Coke can. I think we go into 330 beer cans and I think you just redesign everything for us. And that was it. Like a month of kind of like Logan breathing into my ear, looking at my laptop screen. Bit more red, bit more yellow. I'm not sure about that color. Change this, change that. Designed by committee, which is something from that day on I've like fought to avoid. Even as we grow and are like owned by a multinational, it's still like, please just go away, which doesn't gel well with some kind of managing principles. But after that, we created the kind of five original Beavertown canned beers. Obviously, there were original beers before, but like the kind of canned beers, and we took what I saw people doing and saying about the original Gamma Ray bottle, which was like the shift in my mind from like my ego being just my ego and wanting people to think, oh, you're such a good illustrator, you're so cool, you love like sci-fi and Star Wars, wow, so original, that's amazing, sort of thing, became like, wow, I really want this business to succeed if everybody's gonna, every time we create something, everyone's gonna look at and taste something and have that reaction to our faces, then I want to be there forever doing that. And that became the kind of like plan. That became the brand ethos and the plan of just like, we need everybody to go, wow, that looks cool. Wow, this tastes delicious. Every single time we did something. And it was why we got away with like not doing any marketing. I didn't know how to do it anyway, but we did cool beers that taste delicious and had a really fantastic story. I mean, like Logan is basically like a one-stop shop of like amazing things. If you look at, his life and his family and what he's doing now. And like, even like, people were super interested in like, the fact that he had kids and his family life and how that dynamic worked. And it was just like, we kind of exact place, exact right time, exact right people. And then when we were kind of in our insane growth phase, it was like 10 months between kind of jumping sites. So we'd gone from being 10 months at Duke's, just Duke's, to like having a lockup that we needed because we needed more space to ferment in like begged, borrowed, stolen, occasionally plastic vessels, and making the beers that way. And then 10 months between going, we need a proper brewery, Hackney Wick. That's where all the beers were created to begin with. We had the infamous mezzanine. So the brew house was below the mezzanine where we all worked. So when they were brewing, it was just a steamy mess of laptops and furniture from Skips and everyone kind of sharing a big glass desk. And it just like, that was, and when you couldn't flush the toilet while they were doing the transfer because it like changed the water pressure, the one toilet. And then it was 10 months before we had Lockwood and Tottenham Hale, which is where we exploded and where you worked and where, we like absolutely not only kind of cut our teeth with the kind of industry and community of British craft beer, but we kind of became, leaders in it. I think it's that arrogant to say we were properly like responsible for the beer fridge just kind of brightening up a bit to begin with, which was great. Like it really, like I had a weird attitude to it where like when stuff came along that was kind of copying what we were doing, it was just more energy to like be better. It was like, all right, you want to play this game? Let's go. And then alongside the kind of beers, as you know, we at that point had like, we were such a tight group of people and brewers, and everyone kind of interacted and went to the pub, and we all had like really messy nights at the brewery that like management really weren't allowed to know about. And like, just doing things together, the leaving card, like the one you've got behind you, like, everyone kind of got like nice little tokens of their time at Beavertown. And we had the tap room, which we've discussed in detail, but like the tap room was such a great spot. And, it was a tap room. It was those, I can't remember what those benches are called, but the ones, the benches, the tables,
like the Oktoberfest
Yeah.
batches. I don't
And it
awful
was
name for them.
and it was cold and you were uncomfortable and the queue was pretty huge. But if, occasionally you get a nice free beer, if you were just like, I've waited such a long time, they'd be like, no worries, here's a free one, or here's like 5 free ones. Or someone would disappear off into the warehouse that was just a member of the public, and you'd go find them kind of like half asleep on a bag of molds or something. Like, these were the days, before you had kind of everyone looking in and going, well, we gotta tighten up these processes.
Yeah.
Um,
What are your processes?
yeah.
What are processes? Oh,
I don't even work in it. Oh, you're from the police? Oh no, yeah. But yeah. So then we got to that point, and then there's kind of a period which I kind of almost moved a bit too fast, where I don't really remember how we kind of got there. But there was the extravaganza, 8,000 people coming to a festival we put on with about 10 members of staff managing it, and multiple multinational beer festivals, like going all over the world, kind of spreading out.
yeah.
I remember being in like Scandinavia really early on and having to not be in Scandinavia because it was like, well, we need some beer for London, which was, I remember that being a big thing and being like, that makes sense. Like, that seems like we've done a bit too much in one direction. But for sure, there's
I felt like the extravaganza was a really big moment, actually. It was where I was like, the tap room's a perfect analogy. It's just like, that's what Beavertown felt like. And then day in, day out. And then we went to the extravaganza, we did the people who pulled that off. And I was just like, oh my God, this is huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
8,000 people who are willing to come and drink these beers. And I was like, this is at Printworks as well, like the epic venue, and then the legendary after parties and stuff. And I was just like, this is serious. Like, this is a seriously growing big brand at the moment.
It was, yeah, and it was mad, and the whole time the whole time the artwork was still a big deal. The branding, the artwork. I mean, it was people really engaged with it in a way that I could never have dreamed about. Like I mean, like I don't think anybody doesn't get into art to have people kind of adore them, right? Like I think there's got to be like, yes, tortured poets, yes, like people who are genuinely like pure craft without kind of the consideration of ego or whatever. But like, I don't think there's anybody in the world who wouldn't like it a little bit if someone was like, that's cool. And when people are kind of forced to look at it because they like the beer or just beer, it's like the easy route. It's the easy route to that level of kind of like, oh yeah, like you've seen my artwork. It's on that beer and it feels great. But it also is like, it was energizing. It was really energizing. So you have to really stay on top of that because you're under as much scrutiny as the beer is. And I guess this is a good segue into post extravaganza announcement of Heineken deals and things like that, and the very, very reasonable backlash, the very reasonable disappointment in people, because you're on this trajectory upwards, and the trajectory upwards, it feels like it's like a crowd surf, right? It's like you're crowd surfing. And then when you get to the end of the crowd surf, you're like, we don't need you anymore. We've actually got these robots that are going to hold us up from now. And we don't need, you can go away. And in a way, I mean, I know that's how people saw it. And I'm not trying to like, diss anybody or anything, but it's definitely the community, the craft beer, the zeitgeist, the thing that was like the perfect timing for us was, it was, it was, as it's scary when your feedback comes from social media and it's, and just people. And all of a sudden people can turn on a dime because they care. They don't really care about you. They love you and they care about you, but they don't really just care about you. They're like, I want this whole thing to keep going. And it's a sellout, right? You're selling out. And everybody has this view of that because everybody knows about a little bit about music, and there's real like comparisons to be drawn between bands that like all of a sudden weren't independent anymore, and it looks like you're kind of taking the easy route out and you're doing this thing. And for me as well, like hearing about it for the first time and that it was going to happen was just like, oh God, like, wow, there's going to be like a stop here. There's going to be like there's a wall, there's an absolute wall, and you don't know what's behind that wall, but there's definitely something you have to like get over. And in this, I think it's important to also say like, it's only hard because of the egos involved. It's not hard because it's like, like I'm so stressed and like it's such hard work and it's all this kind of stuff. It's just purely you've been running on the gas of people like adoring everything that the brewery does and wanting to engage with it, and then all of a sudden it's a bit of a naughty word for people to like Beavertown and things like that. But then after that, I mean, even now, I was kind of thinking the other day that the extravaganza was so big that I don't think any of us could really think what the next step was after that, like in
Mm.
terms of, where we were. And now it makes sense because you can see it from like a distance, and it's like, oh yeah, like it makes sense. It still doesn't mean it wasn't shitty and hard for like a period, but it was like, it was difficult because not only do people, the general public stop feeling the same way, but you get it. I mean, we had a lot of people leave, as and go, and they were like, no, I liked it when it was like that. And there's other ways I can keep doing that, which is like very admirable actually, because like it's just the way it works. But we then, in turn, like from a brand perspective, it was like, well, we need to keep this energy up because people are used to this happening, and then everything they like about their brand just disappears. And there are examples, and I'm probably like very savvy. The listeners of this podcast are probably very savvy enough to know exactly what I'm talking about. But it does happen, which is why it's like it's a fear. It's very much not going to stay the same. It's very much not business as usual. It's very much not kind of like, well, but we're still, the exact guys, and love. And we talked about it, but like a good example of something that I can kind of point at and hold our hands up is like, we couldn't keep doing the tap room the way we were doing it with the Heineken ownership, but we also couldn't not have a tap room because it's like, well, we kind of need a kind of bit of a destination. We're trying to work out what we're doing. So we pump kind of a lot of energy into something. It ends up being a little bit of a nothing. You're not getting the character of like a very cobbled together, almost community led tap room. And you're also not getting a bells and whistles tank house with like all of the like amazing pouring and dispense methods and like cleaning methods and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, you get like a bit of a nothing, because then that's where the kind of emulation of small comes from. But the frustration is like, no, but look what we used to do. Like, it's not like we've just like tried to fake it. We have the credentials. So I think to put it into a brand perspective, it's more like that there came a point where everything kind of clicked into place for everyone. It's like, right, what we used to do and what we had as a brand and as a brewery needs to be concrete and a foundation for what we now do, and not something which is like a crutch that we rely on for people to like us. So it's everything changes, and it's like, all right, we did get here through a lot of hard work. Team was tiny. We did all this stuff. There are so many people I can point at who made that journey so amazing and did such a good job with like such little resources, and just we made us exactly who we are. And everybody who bought Beavertown as well did that, and it was great. And then you kind of go, right, well, actually, the focus is supermarkets. The focus is, on trade and off trade in a large way that isn't the same on trade and off trade. Hopefully, you're really trying not to like cap the smaller breweries and like compete and try and like mess them over. Obviously it does kind of happen naturally. And obviously the frustrations are there. And obviously there's quite a lot of justified finger pointing, some not so justified finger pointing. It's interesting to me the way that, the like craft breweries are kind of, there's almost like a resurgence, which is weirdly paralleling with like indie music coming back a bit. Like a lot of indie bands are like coming back, but I think a lot of breweries are, the last thing I was reading is they're kind of taking the word craft out of things, and they're just directly independent breweries. Like it's like we're independent breweries, which is a great way to, just do what you said, do what it says on the tin, right? Like that's not something we still, I mean, like I mean, I might be in trouble for saying this, but it's kind of frustrating to me that we still use the word craft for some things, because I think that it can be a bit misleading. It can be a bit kind of like owning something that needs other people to own. I like beer. I like the word beer being what we make because we're a brewery. But it can, but like, yeah, that's more of a personal take. But but again, it's also to do with like how we operate and what we need to be doing. And even like website SEO is like when you need to include certain words to kind of even be on Google's list, beer things and yada yada. There's a lot to it. But that kind of gets us to today. So today is, if you're still following Beavertown on social media as a craft beer fan, do a lot of big projects. So like we just had Halloween. We did 3 different animations that were kind of trailers to fake Halloween films, and we kind of linked that to Playing the X's, the Prince Charles Cinema. And then when people turn up to the Prince Charles Cinema, there are like people dressed as like zombies, werewolves, mummies, and fake paparazzi taking pictures, which is amazing because we got a lot of tourists being like, "Where are the celebrities?" Like properly, like but it was just this activation. And then the really cool projects for me now, it feels like a totally new job. The kind of big out of home stuff, so like doing the big billboards, learning about what the kind of media guys are buying and why and where it is, and working that out. And yeah, you kind of see it kind of takes away, like, it can be unfortunate the way people think about aggressive advertising and marketing. But I mean, I think we ended up our first campaign. I remember chatting to most of the people who did the stuff they did, but in our first campaign, we kind of went with like a package of billboards, and it meant that a few of those billboards were like close to or outside of other breweries. And I mean, there's no way that doesn't feel aggressive, right? Like, there's no way.
Yeah, it definitely does.
And they like either photoshopped or went and sprayed over bits of it and stuff. And I was like, it's cool. It's like, it's quite funny. And the designers for those breweries would like, we'd chat, and I'd be like, I think it's cool. Like, it's not a big deal. Again, it's just like quite a nice little nudge, and, being held accountable a bit. And then after that, it's like, all right, now we need to actually strategically not do that. Because that's not that. We're not that brewery. And I don't like the idea of ever like going on the attack. And when we get kind of like pitched ideas for like general ideas that are like even remotely like saying something's bad because we're good, I'm like, we don't need that. Like, you really always want to be on the like, we believe in this, and that sort of thing when it comes to branding as well. But yeah, there's a lot of strange like learnings coming. This is still my first job, and I've been here 13 years, man. So it's like, there's a lot of learnings to it. And now it's not, very much the brand plan was, draw a cool picture, profit.
Equals profit.
And now it's like, people shout words at me like shoppability and clarity, and, do they get the tone of voice ownable? And it's like, it's new thinking for me. But everything, we still have a kind of filter that things go through when it comes to the more kind of standard marketing thing, which I hope I'm a big part of. Kind of, we get some consumer insights or some feedback, and then I'm like, well, that's great, but like, make sure it happens the right way.
Mm-hmm. What were the biggest drivers for the big Beavertown brand changes? Well, brand changes might be a strong term, but a good one was like, back in the day, I remember there was that Illuminati logo.
Yeah.
And then that changed. And then we had the cans with the skull faces on, which I think was originally people there. And then there was a big change from that can to basically what Neck Oil is today, similarly, I believe.
Yeah.
Like, what sort of inspired those changes? Were they coming from you? Were they coming from, was it a group decision? Like, yeah, really interested to know what was behind the scenes on that.
So like in a kind of sentence, I was like belligerently against anything remaining that I hadn't created. It was like, it was a very selfish reasoning behind like wanting to push for things, but it didn't just happen in like a one-er. There were things that Logan was quite into that it took a bit of, I found out quickly that if you just go, you thought this was good, but it's not good, then that won't be a good way to get the way you want things to happen. And I think he'd be okay with me saying that, even now, but this is a sort of interview where I'm like, did you see that interview I did with Chris? Yeah, so the Illuminati stuff was purely Logan. I think, I forget what specifically he was reading about, but it's why we kind of became so close, is we both had kind of like, not niche, but kind of like teenage boy niche, like things we liked. I mean, like, we love Star Wars and sci-fi and like Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff. And he was really into it. He wanted the pyramid and the Illuminati, and he liked the dollar bill artworks to begin with. They came off the back of the original branding, which was it's hard to explain the original branding without looking at it. It's available online, but it's kind of like an American like smokehouse artwork, but in the form of like a British pump clip for a car scale. Yeah, I think that's the way I'd put it. If you imagine if Timothy Taylor was wearing a cowboy hat, it's kind of like that. Or like the landlord on the landlord pamphlet as well. But yeah, it was like, but it just said Beavertown, and like, he was kind of like, again, like, probably not telling about this, but like, he thought it was quite cool the way that the word, the B of Beavertown kind of looked like 13 in the triangle, and he's like, because it's like a mystical, spooky number. And even I then was like a bit like, oh, all right, man, cool. But yeah, so we had that for a bit, and it kind of like, there was quite a quick shift into my illustration style via Gamma Ray being so popular. but maintaining, it was very strict about it, actually. He was like, every artwork has to have the pyramid in it, and it has to be quite big, and it has to be where the logo is. And like, we created our own font, but it was like that. It has to kind of sit close by. And it was, there was a lot of, he did a lot of the art direction for a while, even though I was like the art director, but he did a lot of the kind of like, no, it needs to be like this. I really do like this. Like, it was self-expression from him. And as frustrating as it could be, it's like so justified and wonderful he did that, because it kind of like shapes. And every time I realized that like I was going to need to do these things every time, those limitations became ways of working them into things in a very organic way, instead of finishing an artwork and being like, oh yeah, and here's the pyramid. And then so the neck oil one's quite different, because neck oil became, Gamma Ray was obviously the first big beer, and people still are like, oh wow, yeah, I remember my first Gamma Ray. Like, Gamma Ray was always
Yeah.
the like number one, again, like 4 or 5 pints for 5.4% APA, which is just what the doctor ordered like every day. I'm like, yeah, I mean, used to drink a lot of it too. And when neck oil started to like come up, it was like, again, the kind of right time where people were like, those IPAs are great, but maybe there's a massive space for something a lot lighter. Thus the session IPA, right, which is now probably the most common beer style in the on trade. Even if it's not called session IPA, you've got a kind of like ABV range of like 3 to 4, 5-ish. That is something that you could technically drink a bit of. And as it kind of got bigger and bigger, neck oil, the original artwork with all the skulls on it, was like, that was when we moved into Lockwood and started brewing it in cans, because it was like Gamma Ray and I think like Smog Rocket and 8 Ball, and then neck oil kind of came a bit later, I think. I can't remember. And the can artwork was like, well, it's like a team of like 12 people, including some of my friends who'd been like putting together furniture and stuff with pallets. And we just like whacked them all on the can as skeletons and skulls, which is so lovely. And I've got only a few of those left, and there's definitely a few tattoos of that out in the world, which is quite funny, because they didn't know. They just thought it was like, oh, cool, skeletons. And then when the neck oil recipe was kind of evolving and changing the whole time, Gamma Ray was gaining traction. So, best bitter Batham's clone, through to more like keg beer, pale ale, but still on the maltier side, less hops, more and more American hops, more New Zealand hops, I think. Not great on that, you'd know better. But and then as it kind of changed into that beer, it was like, right, this actually needs like a schism, basically. Like, it needs to shift into being a brand new thing that we can do what we did with Gamma Ray with an artwork. So it was really important. And it was another thing that Logan and I worked really close on. I remember like one Christmas, I would have been like Christmas 2014 or 15. He was like sending me photos of packing tapes he liked the colors of, which is actually how the orange and the yellow came to be. And I'd done it so it was a bit more like Gamma Ray had like a blue sky and stuff in it. And I think he was like, yeah, maybe, but like it needs to be its own thing. And so then it got the kind of oranginess, because it was very much like the flavors coming through. And he's not saying this to me. Now I get that feedback, and it's like, we got to make sure the flavors are apparent from the colors on the can. But then he wasn't doing it on purpose, but he kind of was. Does that make sense? It's like,
Yeah.
getting this like orange, like a little bit hazy IPA, basically, like a mini IPA. And then that became the artwork. The skull logo replaced the Illuminati artwork when our head of sales and marketing, Lauren, did you cross over with Lauren? Yeah, you crossed over with Lauren. She just was like, I was in the shower and like, I just thought like, why don't we just change the O in Beavertown to like one of your skulls? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I think I would want to do that from the beginning, but it was kind of like, no, just like, our Beavertown's our logo, and then the triangle is our logo, and we put it in, and they were together for a while. So we started the pyramid with the triangle, and then Beavertown with skull in the name. And then we moved away from, basically I had to like strong arm it and be like, come on, man, it's time to let it go. All right, let's take down the posters and let's put up some framed artworks in the house. Okay, like the Che Guevara poster is coming down. The rugs on the walls are coming down. We're going to have a bit of a cleanup. And then
I just imagine the pyramid getting slowly closer to the edge of the can design.
Well, actually, you say that, but if you look at the lineage of them, the pyramid gets a bit smaller, like just a tiny bit, kind of gaslighting Logan. I'm like, no, they're all the same size. They're all the same size. But yeah, then it kind of like changed, but then it kind of opened up the avenue of it being like, well, that's our character. Everything that we do now, we've got the Phantom range was the first kind of like range of skeletons with the kettle sours, and yeah, it just, and again, it plugged straight into somehow what people really wanted to see and drink. And it was, a really easy thing to get people on board with. And it made it kind of like the justification really easy too, because now it's like, well, what, well, you're kind of designing for kids. And it's like, well, I'm designing for people that used to be kids. They used to love this stuff and they kind of still do love this stuff, but now they like beer as well. So obviously, like the kind of like the mini 3-sentence version is the Portman Group did come and talk to us about kind of appealing to under 18s. And 6 months of my life was pretending to be a lawyer, emailing them stuff back and forwards about like line thickness and the colors the Simpsons used versus the colors we used, and the colors that Bob the Builder's used versus the Necro color. And like it was a while. But we got there, we got there in the end, and they saw it, and that also opened the door a bit for other brands. But then it also, like, not funnily, and I don't mean like I'm glad other brands got kind of stung by them, but I think we also did the whole industry a lot of service, but also a bit of a disservice, because every now and again, I think they pop up and snipe a brand off, being like, we're still here and we're still in charge.
Yeah. Yeah, we still got you. We're not gone anywhere. Yes. Because wasn't the original Gamma? It was the Gamma Man, right? And then it became with the skull on.
It was very Dan Dare, like Action Man. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was very. Yeah, I mean, it was very. It was. I mean, to be fair, it was very kids, like Commando, old comics sort of thing. Like it was. Yeah, it was very much like that. And the skulls were like a really ill-advised. Like, this is definitely more adults sort of thing. But it doesn't. It really. I don't think it changed the way. If kids were looking at it the way they thought kids were looking at it, and they weren't, because you don't underage drink like a £6 330 milliliter can of IPA, do you? Then I don't think either has really particularly got many legs to stand on. But maybe the skull's better. But I don't know.
Yeah, really funny that they're like, yeah, oh, it's got to okay. No, the skull, yeah, that's fine. Kids won't buy into that. Yeah. Like that's the line that they've drawn, but sometimes they probably just want their opinion.
I think I read my toddler like Funny Bones like every night for the last week or something.
Yeah. And then slowly started reaching for the Gamma in the fridge. No, I've seen what they were right the whole time. So that's funny, man. So I've got a question for you, because there'll be people listening to this and they'll be in charge of brand or have an input on brand, like. And something I quite curious about, especially now we talk about the Skull era of Beavertown, where that's been quite consistent for a while, is like, how do you keep things consistent without it getting old? And how would you advise breweries or branded people to do that?
See, I hate consistency, so I would say don't keep it consistent. Always be building it and changing it. Because it's kind of something that was a really interesting process for me with what we were calling the second transaction with Heineken, when they fully bought out the business. Is they have a system called like brand in a bottle, which is intended for a brand that's a lot simpler than ours. That, like, simpler in terms of like they have very simple brand iconography, Moretti, Amstel, like things like that. Where you can condense it into some pieces of information that means it can be sold all over the world by anyone. Which is essential if you are planning to basically send it worldwide with your distribution channels. And we obviously were just coming out of being, a darling craft beer of the movement, and into kind of like a little bit kind of like alienated and ostracized by the community. But at the same time, we also had to think about a growth plan that involved kind of changing and the brand evolving and adapting as organically as we possibly could. So writing it down felt really destructive. It felt like you were just removing, if you defined it, it was gone almost straight away, because for me, it had never been defined. So to answer your question from a practical standpoint, the advice I would give is never feel like you've found this kind of settled notion of like the optimum of where you can be at, because the world changes, flavors change, people change. You can have some very strong imagery, and you can have some very strong concepts, and you can even just have a very strong word logo. But you have to remember, as even massive brands find out, you can't just sit on that, And I think that actually consistency is not necessarily as helpful as people think it is. It's easy to process, but I think that doing things the hard way can be the most beneficial thing, and keeping things consistent is almost like just leaning into it being easy because you've done it, and it's like it can be pushed over there, move on to something else. Whereas actually, like, I think it's about tweaking and evolving and working and just thinking like, okay, because you can have a really solid launch as a really small brewery and have really lovely branding, and you can either go super simple or you can go like really in depth and bright and vibrant and illustrative. And a lot of breweries do both these days, like individually both. But those things are only as good as how much people remember them. And if you're keeping people excited and entertained, I mean, the I feel like the secret sauce to the Beavertown branding is nothing's ever like a simple beginning, middle, and end story in an artwork, so that people aren't going, "Oh yeah, I totally get it," and then you stop thinking about it. You hopefully want people to be like, "It's interesting. I kind of didn't understand why they'd done this, but I liked it."
Mhm.
And then they ask their friends about it, and then they kind of talk about it. And some of the nicest feedback that we've got through kind of like friends of friends or just like general is like, I always feel really cool with a can of Gamma in my hand, or like if I'm at a house party, someone will talk to me about that. And it's that, that's the sort of thing that keeps people interested.
That's really interesting. How do you think commercial goals sort of sit in within the brand? So do you think, well, I guess that you never had, this is the type of drinker that I want to be drinking these beers, so I'm going to design things around that? Because am I right in thinking it comes from you, all of this? So
It's definitely like, there's definitely been the before times were very much like screw your feedback. I think this beer's going to look like this, so it's going to look like this. When I've tried to do that with a when there's basically as more people have joined Beavertown as professionals in their field, you just can't do that, right? So like you can try and you'll piss a lot of people off, but like but eventually you'll get strong armed into something. And they're not concessions of like values; they're just concessions of like, yeah, but like we're not going to sell any of this beer if people are confused about what it is, or like that's so obscure of a reference to the thing that you're just going to turn people off of it. So it's so commercially, it's I hope that makes sense, but it's more like when we have products, it's like there's got to be at least. I mean, I think the best example I could give you is our most recent advent calendar beers. So they've all got some real flavor to them. There's like a cola bottle-y one. So I drew like a kind of skull polar bear on it to kind of make fun of the Coca-Cola. But he's got like a bottle, like obviously a cola bottle, but it's in like a brown paper bag. Right. So it's like you can't see it, like, if you're drinking and, like, but yeah, there's like, that's something where I would have been like, okay, you need to have some sort of impetus. But those beers are fun because they don't make as much of an impact because no, I don't think anybody's going to buy that again necessarily. They might be like, wow, that's the best beer I've ever had. I need to get as much of that as possible. But the longevity of our kind of core range comes from people being able to see it, recognize it, gravitate towards it, and understand what it is that they're buying. So that's the impetus that is like, if there's a new thing that needs to do that, how are we going to maintain what those already do?
Mhm.
And then I feel like I might be about to answer a question that you're about to ask, but something that's really big for me is consumer insight. So when you get feedback or testing, or like when you use focus groups, you need to make sure that information is contextualized. And it can drive me nuts hearing it played back to me. Like, we need to make all these changes because, like James from Milton Keynes says that he doesn't like skulls. So we need to remove all the skulls. And Sharon from Kingston, is a really big fan of flowers, and she doesn't feel like there's enough flowers on our beers. So we need to do that. And actually, like, that's like, there needs to be a few layers between those people and then what you end up doing. So feedback from, even if it's not from focus groups, even if it's from like friends or like anybody, you need to always like just take a step back and work it out. And I think it feeds into why I think like as helpful and wonderful as social media more used to be before everybody had to just leave Twitter. You need to contextualize that too. That's a really great feedback method. And you need to contextualize it both ways. Like, am I in a bit of a bubble here of people just like loving what I'm doing and constantly saying it's great, and one day they'll just all move on? Or am I actually worrying too much about the negative feedback and should I be just doing what I think is right, because you need to involve a lot of gut feel in branding.
So interestingly, I picked up that you were like, before, I just use the term back in the day because I hate it, but back in the day you were much more, no, I'm kind of going to do it this way because this is what I believe is right. And now maybe that's changed into more absorbing some consumer insights. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. Yeah. Because we, without really intentionally doing it or realizing it, we had like an army of mobilized people who just believed and just like literally lapped up what was happening, because they were like, every time Beavertown release a beer, it looks so cool and it tastes so good and it's always so interesting. And they've worked with some American brewery, or they've collabed with another English brewery we love, or a British, like anywhere, a European brewery, a brewery basically. And or it was just like a crazy brew. I mean, we didn't do that many of the kind of mental, dump a load of marshmallow into it brews, because I think that we actually still have quite a stubborn brew team who, even when we do the neck oil with the glitter in it, are like, ugh, every year,
Yeah.
because it's that seaweed. Obviously it's not glitter, which is funny. People are like, how could you just put glitter in it? It's like, no, it's. But yeah, there's that element where it's like, man, we used to be making IPAs. What?
Yeah. Just nice and easy, refreshing IPAs.
But yeah, but it just like it has to change, and you have to have there's so many voices in the room, right? It's very much a case of like, it's very much like a case of like actually listening to the voices, but contextualizing the voices now, and not just saying, the legacy was impress people with both branding and beer. I think it was, we used to say, like, if it looks great, but it tastes shit, you'll remember it tastes shit. You won't remember it tastes good. I mean, look good. So yeah, that was it. And now it's different. So
Do you think this is a classic, like, production mind asking creative, but do you think there's a right and a wrong way of doing it? Do you feel like you couldn't have done the first part with loads of consumer insights because it would have kind of maybe not had your creative freedom, so to speak, that you had? Or do you think that actually with all those consumer insights, it would have been a better journey, so to speak?
So I think you can very much kind of like bounce along the bottom by emulating what other people are doing. Like I genuinely believe that. And if you're happy to do that, then all power to you. Like it's fine. I don't have a whole lot of respect for the method, but like, if that's what you want to do. So I think that would be the wrongest way. But maybe there's not I mean, the wrong way you'll find really quickly, right? You'll be like, my dog's called my beer is called like dog shit beer, and it's like, and it's covered in swear words, or like, I don't know, like, and the people will be like, what? But then there's like also like the emulation thing it can ramp up a bit for you, and you can end up like doing it right. So there's kind of a mix of, like I was saying, gut feel, but but it's so hard to answer that question nowadays, because like, if I'd given people advice when we were on the way up, I would say all these things that we were doing that people probably could do that would be exciting for people, but you just couldn't replicate it. And not because of the appetite. It's just like we were a part of this is, I mean, like how I learned what zeitgeist means is basically how we were a part of the zeitgeist, the beer zeitgeist, exact right place, exact right time, doing the exact right thing to really excite people. And now if you were to start a brewery, I don't know, based on what we did, based on having an in-house designer who does everything, and a really strong ideology around what beers you want to make, you'll be making amazing beers that look beautiful, but you might not have the success because it's moved. Everything's kind of shifted. I think it's like Abe Simpson in The Simpsons when he's like, I used to know what it was, and then they changed what it was. It'll happen to you. But yeah, it does, and it makes me feel incredibly lucky, personally. But yeah, I think the right way to do things is honestly to think generally about what seems to be something that people would like, and tap into it. So it's having like a gut feel, and it's quite vague, but like it's like having a gut feel, having a bit of heart in what you're doing, but also not just being like, I love this, so I'm going to do this. It's more like, well, do you think people would like that? And then get some feedback from that and just kind of work on that. But I think there's some really good examples of breweries doing that.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say the zeitgeist thing. And I think you said it maybe just before I hit record, but it's like if you were to follow through everything you did step by step right now, it wouldn't create the same success as it did. And it's kind of finding out what that wave is now that you'd have to jump on almost, or be a part of. Not jump on is probably the wrong terminology, but be a part of that wave to go up.
I really never ever until recently thought I would be the like, oh, kids these days guy. But like, kids are weird. It's like, there's like this idea of like even being a little bit tipsy is like, oh, don't do that. It's like, and like, and like pub culture was like, even when we were kids, it was like a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, mum and dad were like,
Huge.
there you go, there's your beer, but it's not yours if they ask. It's like, it's, and like, yeah, like enormous. And it's just like that, there's a big piece at Beavertown right now about like, well, how do we engage with that? We kind of have to, in a way, like you have to kind of think about it. No one knows, like they're huge. They're really making an impact. But at the same time, there's still kids that drink, right? Like I know, like, I mean, the kids, I'm talking about like, 20-year-olds.
Yeah, on my podcast
I'm talking
soon.
about 20-year-olds. But like, but yeah, I mean, like, there's still generations like down and down and down that are still kind of like into bitter and stuff. It's not that those people fall through the gaps, and I think they're an interesting bunch of people that you can still market to, that still do a good job with. But the big data stuff is interesting, and it just makes me feel so old. It's like, I'm not sure I don't want like a vape flavored soda. Yeah, right. HCBD in it or something. I don't know. Just
that's what it's turning into, though. Quickly, I can see it already. Enough consumer reports. I mean, there's a lot talking about Gen Z or Gen Z, whatever, and not drinking, and it's kind of like something we all want to ignore and hope and pray that when they turn 30, they're like, oh God, this is what we've been missing out on this our whole lives.
there's a lot of people who would be cross at Beavertown with me. Like, so we've still got Sam Miller, who, he's kind of a lot in charge of a lot of these insights and creating like new product development, like trials and things like that. And he's the sort of person that's be like, you've got to stop ignoring this, because I'm there going, no.
Yeah. They will drink at some point.
Yeah.
It will be okay. Yeah, it's a big thing for craft brewers, actually. It's something everyone's concerned about margins at the moment, but in 15, 20 years' time, well, who's drinking is really the good question, and how much are they doing it? I don't think for 1 second it's going to go away. Brewing industry's been around for 5,000 years, and it's going to be around for another 5,000. I have no doubt about that, but it's quite an interesting... It's probably one of the biggest shifts in drinkers in a long time, because you're absolutely right. Growing up, the pub was where social interactions happened from quite a young age. You would always go down the pub, parents were meeting at pubs, kind of just grow up in them, and it doesn't feel like that's happening anymore, which is, it's going to have that effect later on. Thinking about the wider brewing industry, Nick, like, do you think there's brewers who get branding really right outside of Beavertown, and can you share those examples and why you like them?
It's really hard, I think, and I don't mean that from like there aren't them. I just like my like brand love comes from like outside of beer, because I think it's really important. I think, because I think like you like kind of to stay on top of it not becoming too much like the kind of middle ground. I always kind of don't, and absolutely there are, but I'm just gonna say like my friends' breweries, if I start reeling off breweries who get the branding right. But like when we were coming up with other breweries, it was Mikkeller, it was Om de Pollo, it was like, oh, what are they called? The American brewery, Trillium. Yeah, Trillium. And they're all still people that I talk to a fair amount. Stillwater as well. We're like kind of really art led, and like occasionally talk to people like that, like they're big breweries. But I think I'm like one of the luckier ones out of that kind of group to still be doing this sort of thing. Like a lot of them are still doing artwork, but it's not for breweries. And it's harder when you're just doing artwork to promote your own artwork. It's so much easier to just be kind of slapping it on thousands of cans that just go into pubs. But yeah, I think that there are breweries. There are definitely breweries, like new breweries, that get it right. And I think a lot of them look at inspiration from the right place. So like, and obviously like seriously biased plug, but James Rylance has Ideal Day, right? Beers are phenomenal. He's very much
Yeah.
along the lines of the kernel ethos of like everything is quite similar and familiar. And it's great to do it that way, because it's like, you know that it's coming from, because it like the whole message is like a familiar message and a familiar beer, and both are really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of having like a family brewery is just a lovely thing to do, especially if you're actually doing it. You know, like you could be like, we're a family brewery, and it's like a bunch of like old dudes. Like, but no, full family, all four of them doing it. Nia, James, Otis, and Owen.
That's so cool. And so, what sort of brands outside of the brewing industry do inspire you?
I think now, just because it's like thinking about how you can be so successful and so big and be so like memorable, they're not particularly like niche or like exciting. So you've got like Nike, for example, who like somehow kind of maintain this element of like very cool, even though they are what they are. And they do it not through the design, but through kind of activations and the kind of like more markety speak stuff that they do. It's really cool. But still, like, I mean, I wear Nike shoes, so it's like that sort of thing. There's a few. I don't love everything that they do, but I think that it's interesting that Liquid Death have had the success that they've had, because I think it's a really strange model. And I think that it's really funny. And I think the design's awesome. And I think that the concept is great. And I think that they're just really, to me, they're like interesting in a very positive way. Not something that I would like recommend emulating, but like I think they're just like, that's not, I know. So it's hard not to like be like, don't do it. Like, but I just think it's confusing to me. I wouldn't personally be like doing exactly that. It's like, yeah, I think they're a cool brand, but like they're doing the right thing. I mean, they seem to be getting it right. If you don't drink, they pop up everywhere, right? Like we had this conversation about how would you get your beers in the hands of bands like Reading and Glastonbury and stuff, when actually bands intentionally have cans of Stella and Carling and stuff, like, because they're like, we don't mess with that muck. This is our stuff. And how do you do that? And how do you do that in a cool way? And there are some brands that manage to kind of get in there and kind of worm their way in. Yeah, they're one of those bands. They're one of those brands, right? They're almost the way that I would say that like a lot of our stuff is too conceptual or looks a little bit too pretentious is a problem. But it's because I always want things to be a bit more interesting. So like finding a balance is.
Question actually, when you were just talking then, especially Liquid Death kind of sparked it. I've listened to a podcast with the founder and the backstory of it, and it's so interesting. But for all these successful brands that we're talking about, do you think that it's important that the branding is kind of an extension of their personality, or do you think it's something that you can emulate?
I think it's great when it does come from an extension of personality. And I think that like Beavertown genuinely comes from mainly Logan's personality, and like then mine becoming more and more of like kind of mix. And then, I mean, I find it so hard to think about leaving or untangling myself from Beavertown. It's kind of like tricky. But I mean, if you want to be like ironclad, yes, you do actually. If you want to stand up to every bit of scrutiny that gets thrown at you, you can't just be like, well, they were doing it, you know, like because it's going to fall flat. And I mean, I really love Madry, as just what they did, and like what, and just the biggest bold faced lie that was so easy to track down, but because it was so cheap, it didn't matter. Like nobody gives a shit. Like they're drinking a cheap European lager made in Burton-on-Trent, right? And actually, I never once was like those fuckers. I was just like, that's just amazing. Like you've spent more money than you're going to get back on this to begin with, at least like a lot, like just to advertise this kind of like, I think they even had like a story of like Spanish brothers or something that was like, that went along with it. And, yeah. I mean, it's actually incredible. Adam Buxton did like a joke, I think, on his podcast about like, he's saying if you don't want something that has the superciliousness of neck oil, which is how I learned what supercilious means. Great word. I can't remember what it means, but I did learn.
Straight over my head, but yeah.
Or the seriousness of something else. Then you go for a Madry, but it was based on a lie. Kind of, it's very serious kind of like bit. But yeah, I think it's amazing because like that's where money talks, right? That's where that's where you've gone completely over the top of all of that, kind of having a proper backstory and having faith in what you're doing, and you just pump money into it. But you can only do that if you are AB InBev, like you just or SAB or whoever owns them. But like, yeah, it's that. But so to go back to the question, yeah, I think that like if you, as a brand at least, like you have to have something, and it's why it's a little bit. I don't know how. I like to give people a lot of the benefit of the doubt that most people are quite savvy, because when you see the like Instagram adverts, it's like, in 2012, my son came home from school with a backpack full of junk, and we decided then that our jam was going to be 100% dog hair. Like it's like, oh man, like when you see those, and it's just like, I'm sure it's like really hard to obviously trace them back, but I'm just like, sure.
Yeah. Authenticity, I feel like, is one of the most important well, we say that, and then Madri's had the success, but I guess which is the polar opposite of the word authenticity. But
Yeah.
for a startup brand, I feel like, especially like a challenger, having like authenticity is really what people will buy into, and it's quite quick. That quickly gets unwound if it's not.
It's natural, and it's always been natural in beer and craft beer and independent brewing, because like actually you're not really coming into the market with a competitor. You're coming in to be a part of it, right? You're not coming in.
True.
Yeah, like you're not coming in to say like, I can have a bit of the Colonel's lunch. You're coming in to be like, we love what the Colonel do. We want to be a part of this. Yeah, you're not like, yeah, like, or like, like, oh, I think Cloudwater's shit, I want to take him down. It's like, no, we also wanted to try making. We have a passion for making big strong IPAs, or we had a passion for making kind of like old school recipes, or we had a passion for making this and the other, and actually like we've seen what they can do, and it's like, yeah, it's just it's not coming from that place. And then I'm like obviously learning way more and more, being a part of a company that's owned by a massive corporate entity, that actually like there's a balance to be found. And also you also enter that space, and you all of a sudden can't do things because it's like, well, you're not going to be able to compete with things like that, so you can't do it, as opposed to like, well, we can try,
We can try.
Yeah.
No, you actually can't. That's really funny. So Nick, what are the 3 most important things for a brewery's branding?
So I think number one is start off by accepting that you're going to change it. So especially if it's coming from like the closest place to your heart, and the place that an idea that you're like, this is a very personal idea to me, or like it's a story or a family or a memory or anything like that. Even if it starts off like that, you can keep that in it, but the visual identity is almost definitely going to change from the first iteration of the visual version of what you make. Like that's what happened with Beavertown, and it's probably the best thing that could happen. I mean, my version was version 3. If it's probably like version 7 or 8, but like version 3, I call it, and then it was a continuation based on one version that was paid a lot of money for, that you were then able to be like, actually, this is shit. I want to change it completely. Another version that is really, really brilliant, but actually you realize that it needs to be adapted into something else out of necessity, but you can still have the heart and soul and impetus in it, because we created a connection through common things we liked. Number 2 is contextualize feedback. So like, just when you're asking for feedback, remember who you're asking are. I don't mean just who are you sort of thing. It's like, what about them is making them feel the way they're feeling? Because if somebody really doesn't like something, there might be a reason other than your product's bad, or they don't like their visuals. Like you have to, yeah, and not always, but most of the time, at least be a little bit aware of that. Because if you start kind of taking hard right turns or left turns based on small amounts of feedback, it's a recipe for just chipping away at the soul of what you're doing. Because you need to maintain a little bit of a gut feel to the thing that you're doing. Okay, so number 3 most important thing is just have fun. No, you have to be enjoying it. You have to be enjoying the fact that there's feelings about what you're doing, right? Like you have to be kind of enjoying that there'll be people who really don't like it, whatever it is. It can be the most like wholesome thing in the world. There'll be people who are like, that's a load of shit. There'll be people who actively are out to get you because they know that what you're doing is good. And you just have to kind of roll with that every time you do it. And that's just a life lesson, but in branding, it's especially prevalent. And I spent so many years thinking about the people that didn't like what I was doing and how do I bring them on board, as opposed to like, this is great. This is just human. The human reality is that like, if we all agreed with each other, it would be very boring. So enjoy the good with the bad when it comes to especially creating a brand. I think that was some of the funnest things ever, were having people take a shot at what we were doing in person at events, doing a talk with Logan and somebody's there going, yeah, but it's all a bit childish, isn't it? And just being able to be like, yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So yeah, those are my three.
Really good, man. I really like the have fun is important because it's creativity, right? That's where creativity comes from, is having fun or feelings and emotions. Nick, I also wanted to ask if there's fans of your artwork listening to this shows, what else do you do outside of Beavertown art-wise?
Well, I wish I had time. Mostly just drawing with my son. He demands skulls, planets, and rocket ships pretty regularly now. He actually goes, "Dada draws skulls and planets" when I'm off to work.
So
I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much, man. Like, you nailed it." Like, but I see myself doing kids books at some point. I mean, I've done some for my son, which are kind of just for my wife and son. But like, that's the sort of thing. But yeah, the artwork. I'm going to put myself out there a bit more. I think moving from like more from like now, maybe do some commission work and be more open to like people, because I get weirdly shy now, like on social media. I don't really like posting much of what I'm up to. I think just because it doesn't feel like a necessity, like at all. And just, yeah, but I wish I could do more and respond to more things and not just ignore my like folder of messages on Instagram of like, that if you don't know them, it just goes into a different folder. And I'm like, I'll deal with that tomorrow for like months.
Well, it'd be cool to one day, be able to promote those things for you.
Thank you.
To the people, because
I'll need it.
this stuff is sick, man.
I'll need it, man, because
No.
it's not going to be on beer cans anymore, is it? So it's just like you have to really fight for it.
Yeah. Well, I actually got one of your drawings up there, and I have another one of the original Bones artwork that's tucked away very safely.
Yeah.
That one means a lot to me as well. So yeah, thanks a lot for those.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for having me, man, and thanks for being a part of Beavertown and my like journey all those years.
Yeah, man, it was It was definitely an incredibly fun time to be alive. Dramatic at some points, but also very fun.
Oh yeah.
It was there. I was saying at the start, it's a community feel to not just like internally the team, but like community to everyone around was just something. I don't think I'll ever really be able to get that. Not that I ever should chase it, but I don't think I'll ever really get that feeling again of like, the tap room Saturdays were just wild. Freezing cold. People were just outside. No one was complaining about that. The queue was huge. The tap room was like honestly the size of like 2 double beds.
The British press, genuinely, there's a shot from our tap room of like it's raining more than it's ever rained, and they're sitting at one of those tables. They could be sitting inside with just one umbrella between them, leant over the table, with like it pouring down the sides of it. And every time there's an article about how hard it's raining, they use that picture of our tap room.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. And what's so funny about it is it was literally a car park in an industrial estate in Tottenham Hale. Like, it couldn't have been much of an uglier backdrop, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Nothing. Like, I remember taking my sister and her partner and a couple of their friends there, and they were like, "This is the coolest place." And I was like, "It really isn't, but it actually is, all at the same time." And that's like the certain times. It was really fun, man.
Yeah. It was
big stinking malt trailer.
Oh my god! With just the weird syrupiness coming out of the starchy syrupiness pouring out the back into the drain. Like, yeah, ugh.
So gross. We used to collect that and then like dispose of it. It's the worst job. They were the good times, eh?
I never had to do it, so like, don't know.
You didn't have to do it. Yeah, we had to do it. Yeah, it was so bad. Hey, look, Nick, man, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're such a busy guy, but your wealth of experience and something quite unique for this podcast, so production focused. I think it's really good to spark people's creativity and take people down a different path of the brewing world than just production. So thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Chris. Anytime, man.
And once this is done, we're going to go to the pub anyway, right?
Yep.
So,
Such a
on that
fake
note,
goodbye. Like,
yeah, on that
see you
note,
in a
I'm going to
minute.
put this down and instant go out and get a beer.
Oh, dude, see you soon.
What a guy Nick Dwyer is. I really love how positive, honest, and fun he is. I mean, the journey that he has been through is so unique. It's so cool for me to hear it. I hope that everyone listening to the podcast enjoyed it as well. So the next episode is, as I said right at the start, is going to be slightly different. It's going to be a much shorter episode with just me talking, going through the highlights of the last year of the Modern Brewer podcast, the best takeaways that I've taken, the feedback that I've heard, and also going to do some predictions maybe for what 2025 is going to look like, both for the Modern Brewer podcast and what I generally think in the brewing industry as well. So stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed this episode, or you feel like someone you know would benefit from listening to Nick Dwyer speak about branding, please do share the podcast around. It really does mean a lot to me, and getting new listeners is essential to keep the show progressing and going on. So thank you so much to everyone for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Modern Brewer Podcast.